What's up, guys? Today I'm talking about the Communist Manifesto. This is a highly contentious book. It's about communism, and a lot of people love or hate this book and Marx himself. So I'm going to do my best to give him a fair shake and tell you the substance of what he's saying, his best arguments, and his worst arguments, and what I think of them. Um, the book is about 200 pages long. The actual manifesto itself is only about 40 pages. So if this is something you're interested in, it's worth taking a read. It doesn't take that long to get through. It's not that difficult to get through. And it's a super relevant book. I mean, we still are debating the merits of communism and socialism in American politics today. The most important thing I want you to take away from watching this video is a lot of what Marx is saying is actually already in American culture. After reading this book, I realized maybe America isn't really that much of a capitalistic society because the in the end of the book he gives 10 things that he wants to implement into society, and a couple of them, I think about half, we'll see when we get there, are already in our society. So that's a very interesting point. Now, let me just tell you about the main arguments that Marx is saying. The first thing that Marx is saying is all of history is based on the class conflict between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. The bourgeoisie is the class of individuals who own the means of production. They own capital. They own manufacturing. They have powerful ties to the government. They have powerful ties to education. In a sense, these are the ruling class. These are the people who are dictating where a culture, where a state, where a nation is heading. The proletariat, on the other hand, are the ones who work in the factories. They don't own land. They are forced to participate in the mechanisms of industry which are created by the bourgeoisie. They are educated by the bourgeoisie to be cogs in the machine. They are victims of the political decisions being made by the bourgeoisie. But ultimately, there's hope if you're in the proletariat class because Marx makes the very interesting claim that the bourgeoisie are going to self-destruct. The bourgeoisie are eventually going to create enough weapons of their own demise that the proletariat can simply take over. What Marx is saying when he talks about his violent revolution against the bourgeoisie is not that he wants to really get rid of industry. He doesn't want to get rid of labor. He doesn't want to get rid of the means of production. Instead, he wants to put it in the hands of the proletariat. And we'll talk more about exactly how that's going to be done in a bit. The other main point that is being made by Marx is the expropriation of private property. This means nobody can own private property. It shouldn't exist. It should all be in the hands of the government. In my opinion, that is an insanely irresponsible. It's a very dangerous. We've seen this happen in history. We've seen this happen in Russia. We've seen this happen in Germany. It ultimately leads to mass oppression and even death and untold amount of harm when the government decides to take from the people. Centralizing things doesn't necessarily mean things are going to get better. Marx argues that the means of production should be put in the hands of the government. Therefore, all the market forces, all the prices, the hours, the salary will all be determined by the government. Even if that maybe, even if that works on a moral level, which I don't think it does, there's no way it can work on a practical level. You can't have people sitting in a room thinking about what people are going to want to buy tomorrow, what the price should be, how many hours somebody should work on a daily basis. You need the market to determine prices. You need the market to determine supply and demand. You can't just put things in the hand of government and hope that things are going to get better. It's a very faith-based argument to assume that, okay, let's just put everything in the hands of the government and then automatically everything is going to be okay. It's a very similar criticism that people give to free market individuals, which is, oh, just put everything in the hands of the free market and everything will be okay. They're both very similar. And on a side note, it's been argued that as religion decreases, the faith in government has increased in our society. And I think we're seeing this type of thing in communism. There's no more religious structure, so we look to our political structure for moral guidance and economic guidance, when really the government is just made up of people who are corruptible just like anybody else, just like any corporation, just like any individual. And to assume that putting things in the hand of government is just going to create a pure situation is, I think, just plain incorrect. There's a lot of Marx that I agree with. I think Marx does an excellent job at describing what the problem is in society. And there is class stratification. There is a hierarchy of power in our society. But we need to be careful to determine how much of that power is unjust and how much of that power is just. Not everybody can be a LeBron James. Not everybody can be Britney Spears or Ariana Grande. Not everybody can be Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos. These individuals are outstanding individuals. Look at Elon Musk. You can't compare the genius of Elon Musk to the person working on one of his assembly lines. That doesn't determine their value as a human being. But if you just took a couple random people and said, okay, we took the property away from Elon Musk and now we're going to put it in the hands of this government committee, and this government's going to decide how Tesla and SpaceX are run, it's highly doubtful that that industry is going to be able to survive without a trailblazer, without a revolutionary thinker like Elon Musk at the helm. Now, that's not the case for every industry, but I think that's a good example to show how assuming that the person who owns the means of production is just some corrupt capitalist who's just benefiting off the exploitive labor of the worker is just an immature way to look at the relationship between an industry owner and an industry worker. We need these exceptional people to take the responsibility and take the pressure and take the risks for us. Yes, the person working 9 to 5 has a constrained schedule. They're not making as much as Elon Musk. They don't get the Lamborghini. They don't get the actress wife. But at the same time, they don't have to bear the burden of running a multi-million-dollar company with thousands of employees that are relying on you every single day. Being a CEO is not an easy thing, and I think CEOs get a very bad rap in our culture. It seems like if you're a leader of industry, you're some kind of monstrous person, which is just not true. We should be celebrating these individuals, especially Elon Musk. Just a little fanboy note there. Marx does make an interesting point about taking away private property, which is he says you shouldn't worry about taking away private property. I know you're scared by the idea, but in reality, we're only taking the property away from the bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie owns 9/10 of all private property already. So really, the only people who should be worried are that 1%. So really, the only people who should be worried are those 1%ers who own 9/10 of the property already. Now, that makes sense, and that does seem to make it a little bit more legitimate, but really the problem is that's not entirely true. I mean, there's entire industries of individuals who are buying homes, who are buying buildings, and these are private individuals who are not a part of the bourgeoisie. And to take that away from them is a violation of human rights. It's criminal. It's fascist. Honestly, it's fascist. I agree with the problems that Marx brings up about class stratification and the distribution of power and this kind of thing. But I think he misplaces the blame. I believe the blame should be on government. He does actually talk about how the bourgeoisie use the government to enforce their agenda onto the people, and how they use the education system and how they use literature to control and to educate the proletariat in a way that turns them into slaves or turns them into individuals who are cogs in the machine, basically. I think we solved that problem by reducing the power of government, because if the government is smaller, then people who simply make a lot of money off of industry can't influence how people are educated and how people are controlled by government, because ultimately the government already controls education, communication, transportation, environmental things, and if you're rich enough, you can influence the government in those ways. But without the government, you remove a major tool for corrupt individuals to make changes to society for their own particular benefit. So let's talk a little bit about the exact points Marx makes about how he wants to see society built. Again, I agree with the problem. I don't agree with his solutions, which we're going to talk about now. The first point is expropriation of property and land and application of all rents of land to public purposes. I talked about this a little bit already. It simply will not work. If you put all public land into the hands of the government, you're asking for a lot of trouble. It's impossible for humans to try and control this thing in a centralized way. It's something that has to happen organically and through the free market, and not in a centralized way, because you're going to have corruption. You're going to have people who want to reserve certain pieces of land for themselves within the government. 2, a heavy progressive or graduated taxation. This is something that already exists in American society. I mentioned in the beginning of the video that a few of these points are already in our culture, and a heavy progressive tax is definitely one of those things. And even on the first point, there is a lot of land that is already owned by the government. In New York, there's a lot of buildings that are rent controlled and rent stabilized, which basically means the government is subsidizing housing for people, which is kind of along the lines of what Marx is talking about here. 3, abolition of all rights of inheritance. This pretty much goes into the private property argument, which is, if your parents die, you're not going to get anything that they own. 4, confiscation of all property of all immigrants and rebels. Same kind of thing. If you're a rebel, if you're an immigrant, they're taking your property. The weird thing about that is, who defines a rebel? Is a rebel just somebody who disagrees with the political agenda? If so, that is a very fascist type concept. 5, centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of a national bank with state capital and an exclusive monopoly. Again, this is something that was actually in the founding of America, which is the national bank, which is the Federal Reserve. And if you do a little research on the Federal Reserve, you'll find that that institution has done the most harm to the working class than any institution ever created. The amount of inflation that has been created in the Federal Reserve, the devaluation of the dollar that has been caused by the Federal Reserve, and some political policies is criminal. And that is a huge cause of the existence of the poverty class and unemployment, in my opinion. 6, centralization of the means of communication and transport in the hands of the state. This is something that already exists. Also, transport for sure, communication. We have NSA, we have, the government heavily involved in Google, heavily involved in Facebook. I think what Marx is asking is for a little bit more control over communication, which sounds incredibly dangerous to me also. I mean, just imagine Donald Trump being in control of all communication for America. I mean, whether you support Donald Trump or not, Think about it if Hillary Clinton had control of all communication in the nation. Either way, half of the population is going to be very, very upset about that. Not to mention they control all the land. 7. Increase of national factories, instruments of production. The bringing into cultivation of wastelands and the improvement of the soil generally in accordance with a common plan. I mean, that sounds very capitalistic to me. Build more manufacturing. Take lands that aren't being used and cultivate them. Develop the soil, which is an environmental argument, which the government is already in charge of, the EPA. So this is something that that already exists in our society. Number 8, equal liability of all to labor. Establishment of industrial armies, especially for agriculture. This is an incredibly disturbing one. Equal liability of all to labor? Well, I mean, he describes the capitalists as being exploitative because they benefit from all labor. Now, everybody is going to have a hand in labor. Everybody is going to be pretty much forced to work and be put into an industrial army. What does that even mean? This is a very anti-freedom doctrine. Imagine you all of a sudden have to go work in a farm. You're not a farmer. You're not trained. You don't have the experience in farming. It just won't work. You can't just force people to work in an industry just because you think in some kind of think tank that that's the most efficient thing to do. That's why business trumps government, because businesses, they cannot force you to do anything. That's the hugest point about this whole thing, that the people who own the means of production, they can't actually force you to do anything. Marx is telling you he's going to force you to work in whatever field the government deems is the most efficient, which is just outrageous to me. Number 9, combination of agriculture with manufacturing industries, gradual abolition of the distinction between town and country by a more equitable distribution of the population over the country. Now you don't even have a right to live where you want to live. You have to move to a place that the government decides you will be the most valuable for them. I know one of the biggest arguments about gentrification is it forces people out of their homes and where they want to live. Imagine if everybody in the nation had to relocate in order to fit whatever the government thinks is the most efficient thing to maximize labor. I mean, that kind of sounds like what he's criticizing that businesses are doing already. So it's very odd that he thinks, oh, if you just put that same kind of exploitation into the hands of the government, everything is going to be okay. No wonder people like Stalin and people like Hitler love this kind of stuff. 10. Free education for all children in public schools, abolition of children factory labor in its present form, combination of education with industrial production. So this is something that we kind of already have, abolition of children factory, free education, we have that. Combination of education with industrial production. I do not know what that means, but in total, I obviously highly disagree with Marx's solutions to the problems that he describes. I agree with the problems. There is too much control by the ruling class of the government. There is too much emphasis on consumerism, on making sure you make the most money out of everybody. There's too much emphasis on this kind of thing, and there is a massive power inequality between the ruling and the working class. The solution to that is not giving the government more power. It's not centralizing labor and finance and transportation and communication and education in the hands of the government. It's a flawed idea because it's assuming that everybody who works in the government are saints. And if you've been paying attention to politics in the last 10, 20, 30, 40 years, you know that people who work in government are not saints. Just putting everything in the hand of government is not going to solve the problem. Okay? My particular solution, you may disagree with it, is reduce the power of the government. Make governments smaller. Get rid of a federal government. Let states manage themselves so we can see which policies are working in which states, and then you know for sure which policies work instead of just forcing policies and seeing how they work after the fact. My solution to the problem of inequality, power inequality, people not happy with the work they're doing, people not making enough money, is by decentralizing the means of control, decentralizing control of money, decentralizing the means of production. And that's something that's kind of happening when you look at the internet, when you look at apps, when you look at how people are making money in the 21st century as opposed to the 19th century when Marx was alive. Well, that's all I got to say about Marx. Obviously, I disagree and I agree with what he's saying. Again, I disagree with his solutions to the problem, not the problems themselves. If you disagree with what I'm saying, I'm happy to talk about it. I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm not trying to shut anybody down. If there's something I'm missing, if there's something I don't totally understand about what Marx is saying, and granted, I've only read this book. He's written a lot of other books, and perhaps I'm giving him a fair shake by not reading everything he's written and giving him such a scathing review. But if you have something for me, let me know. Send it over. I want to learn. This is about learning. This is about bringing the truth to people. So let me know what you think. If you agree, let me know what you agree on. Let me know what you like. And again, thanks for watching.